episode 4 of the Matt Chat series, where I am talking with Ashton Williams, and we're talking Level Up Enablement. Ashton, how's it going?
I'm so glad to be back. I can't believe we're at 4 already.
Yeah, I know. It's nuts. It's so fun, though. I love this.
I love it. I could do this all day. How do we get paid to do this?
Let's do it. Let's just quit our day jobs and we'll just do this stuff.
It's like a reality TV series on like all the things that enablement can be and do.
That list would be endless, and I'm sure we'd run out of those primetime slots.
Yes, probably.
All right, guys. Today we're talking about leveling up in enablement for the specialist or the senior specialist. Let's go. Hey everyone, again, episode 4, here we are. We're talking about the specialist and the senior specialist. Again, just like what we did with the associate and coordinator, we are going to talk about like, what does this role do? How does it function? Where does it fit within the org structure? Or where do I go to position this within my team? And then what are the hiring or interviewing tips that we have to go along with this entire role? And then most importantly, if you do want this job, what is the skill set or experience that is required for you to land this type of job? So let's kick it off. Ashton, give me the rundown of what our specialist or senior specialist actually could look like.
Yeah, so I think it's probably important to say that like the term specialist is used in a lot of different ways in a lot of different companies. I always try to do a little bit of research in the market to see different job descriptions or how we're describing it differently right now. And in some places, a specialist is like the only sales enablement hire and therefore functioning like a manager, but not a people manager. And in some instances, specialist and associate are quite the same. For my team, because we're actually going through the exercise of like career pathing enablement, it's super exciting. I'm learning so much. The way that I flesh this role out is really, you should know what enablement is at this stage. It's not I don't know if I like it or if I want to be it. It's you're aware of the impact it can have, of how it works. And maybe you're honing your skills on a specific area of enablement solutions. And so I have my specialists that'll be grouped in sense of supporting a go-to-market, maybe not owning it, but being owners of our CMS and having that content specialist, or perhaps they're owners of onboarding coordination and facilitation because that's the skill that they're going to put forward. I would say you probably have like 1 of 5 of the like main enablement threats that we need, right? Those hockey sticks in your bag. But you do know what enablement is, you understand kind of a bit of the sales floor or customer success floor, and you're really getting your feet in to know that you're going to own an impact project.
Yeah, totally on that. And it's the impact is exactly where a lot of people like take that specialist role and really try to hone in on exactly where they're going. So I know like you and I were talking about this a little bit offline, but people also associate very detailed focus areas with these specialists or these senior specialists. So that way they have that designated road basically to go in, and that they're only driving there to provide the most crucial impact to whatever their focus area could be. Mm-hmm. Tons and tons of focus areas that are in there. So like we could go on to a whole topic on focus areas too. Like that's just a whole different topic there. But yeah, tons of different insights, especially for a specialist. I was a specialist for probably the longest of my time. It was about 1.5 years, and I really focused a lot more on like the change management, communications aspects of those, and building out those philosophies for our company. So there's tons of different avenues. Again, content marketing. There's like change management marketing. There's the tons. I can't even like rattle off a list right now.
I think the consistent theme that I've seen when I've seen kind of specialists in the way that we're talking about it, it's really understanding communication strategy. And so this is actually a place where people often come from people team because they understand the communication strategy and content strategy needed to facilitate change. And so it's a really an efficiency focus more than an effectiveness focus, because they're not yet, coaching or senior enough to be like really building onboarding programs, but they understand how to drive efficiency and help change. And so your role can often be focused on content curation, organization, comm strategy, maybe event planning comes in here too, and event coordination when you have an RKO. Yeah. But that focus is really around supporting change management through the different things that enablement can have.
And my favorite word that I think you left out, automation. How do we automate? Automate.
That's where we say the efficiency focus, right? And that efficiency isn't just
Exactly.
the team you're serving, it's internally. So, how do we develop a taxonomy? How do I make it so things auto update? How do I have a regular cadence of newsletters and communication so my team knows where to get what? And you become kind of the face of it, which is cool. So this role actually is also really front facing, which I don't know that people are always ready for.
Yeah. I know when I signed up for it, I mean, I have obviously no problem jumping in front of anybody, but I definitely know like when I
Yep.
first started as a specialist, it was like 250 plus. And I'm like, hi. it was definitely a little overwhelming at first, but
Sure.
yeah, it got better. I mean, it's super easy
Mhm,
once you
mhm.
jump into that.
And I think too, like you just own ushering in really valuable content and information and training and tools for the team. And so in this weird way, like maybe you didn't build that training, but you're the person who has to get everyone hype about it. You're the person who has to like make sure and double check and run the surveys to provide back like how much people are anticipating this. Like there's
Mhm.
just a lot that goes into it that is really getting close to the teams and
Yeah.
close to the frontline teams you're going to work with.
And that's the best thing. I mean, my frontline teams always came up to me and was like, hey, I have a question about this regarding that. And it wasn't necessarily a project I ever did, but definitely I knew the information or where to get the rest of the information for the reps too. So
Yeah.
you get that direct line feedback as well too, which is great for the
For
rest of your
sure. And I'd say that like from an application standpoint, what we've seen is like what I've seen in my past is that people come from a marketing track into specialist a lot,
Mhm.
or directly from a sales role, like an individual contributor role or individual CS role, especially CS and because of the customer education side. So oftentimes it's like you were either that unofficial team lead who like created all the resources for your team and you were the know-how on stuff and took ownership of creating like Salesforce documentation because you realized everyone just kept asking you the same question, or you come from a marketing side where you're at a company where marketing actually owned quite a bit of the enablement and you did a lot of that, or from the people side where that change management is constant, and maybe you have a skill in specific education, like maybe you've started out learning design or you've done a course before or you've been able to facilitate training, but you're not really sure what path you want to go on. You're not really like honed up where you can definitely improve those skills and you've never had to do them at scale.
Right.
Mhm.
No, that's spot on. Let's talk about where the specialist fits in the team structure. Like where do we see this? I know we mentioned like it's just slightly right above, that coordinator or associate, and we have them coming in from different avenues. But where do they fit in the grand scheme of the picture? I know we've talked about like what all they're doing, but what does the team unity look like for us?
Yeah, I guess I'd throw this one back to you because you started out as a specialist. Kind of how was that structure for you? Where did you feel like you fit?
Yeah, so I definitely I would still say it's almost a junior role in the enablement space, but as we alluded to last week, that if you're in enablement, you're not necessarily a junior role. Like it's not an entry level role, so don't ever think about yourself that way. But definitely as the specialist side of things, it was one of those roles that you have to own. You have to own your own path in that, and I think that that's like the best thing to do, because
Mhm.
then you can dictate where and how you want to have focus areas dictated towards, or where do you actually want to specialize in, or where do you want to grow with an enablement. So again, it's that secondary step from the coordinator and associate, that leap pad to choose
Mhm.
your own adventure. And so from that specialist position of where I fit in, it was definitely that frontline representation. People knew me. People asked me all those types of questions of how and where and what I could do to help them. And it
Mhm.
was great because I could actually take that back up to my leadership and say, hey, listen, like I know you're probably hearing this from other leaders, but this is the frontline feedback that we're getting. So you're able to, again, be that individual contributor to provide that bigger impact that's not only affecting just the leadership, but is affecting that frontline world that a lot of people don't even dip their toes into anymore.
Yeah, I also say this, like sometimes managers aren't aware of how their team's really feeling.
Yeah.
And when a team views you as a leader, they don't always tell you stuff. So even in my roles, like, I've had roles where I'm like, I really am here to help you, but I'm viewed as a leader. And so I'm not going to get the same candid feedback, or people aren't going to say like the training wasn't great. And my
Right.
specialist is the person who's like got all this insight, all this nuggets, like can help us redirect a project. Like it's kind of alarming when you think about what we call a specialist outside of enablement, and maybe it's lower impact in some ways, but enablement in general is a high impact space you're going to be in. And in this role, intel, data points, insight, actionable things, and being
Yes.
creative about how we solve problems is the responsibility of every single person on the team from associate up. And
Yeah.
specialists just have this unique position where you're not removed from the team that you serve. You talk to them every day. You're in all their team meetings. You're probably collaborating on refreshing a playbook or what this CMS should look like. And so you just have this direct line that's so special. And so important. And so I'd say where they fit in the team structure is, yes, right above the associate, but where they fit in the organization is almost like a peer coach, where they're there to support the team. They get in with the team. They have the deepest relationships. Usually, they're usually the most popular. Anywhere I go where we actually have an enablement specialist, like RKO, they come out. It's like, yeah. And then that person is like everyone's friend somehow.
Yeah.
But I'd also say that this really depends on the structure of your organization. So sometimes enablement is really far removed from teams. And in a specialist role, you are functioning like a traditional specialist where it's like very content focused or very task focused. You are going to be more task focused than anything else. So at an ownership level, owning your tasks is there. And then the elevated level, you're like creative solutioning. But it depends on the size of your team, the size of your company, and what your focus area is. So sometimes you hire a specialist, like for example, we might have one exclusively for onboarding. Onboarding, just from a content perspective, from an ownership perspective, it's a huge beast. And you might have a specialist that focuses on that. And so they're ushering in new hires all the time, and they're coordinating and building, but not in the same way that a specialist who services perhaps an enterprise team or who services a partnership team or a CS team would function. So your focus area also changes this role pretty significantly.
Yeah, no, that's definitely true. And I love that you hit on, like, even though you're a specialist in one thing doesn't mean we're not touching on any other projects, and we're still just task focused and really just making sure that we're hitting all those out. That's great.
Yeah.
Let's talk about skill set. What kind of skill sets do a lot of specialists need? Again, I feel like this is almost very universal for enablement, because we're all, I hate to say it, but we're almost kind of like a select breed that's out there. I have yet to meet somebody that's a little bit different than a lot of us.
The self-hype is so good here.
Yeah.
We're just awesome. And,
as Ashton said, the specialist is always the most popular. So here we are.
Yeah.
No. Let's talk about, like, what's the skill set? What kind of experience are we looking for?
Yeah.
We talked about coming in from marketing and CS and sales and stuff like that. But
So
let's talk about some other.
this is a pretty special position because, the skill set here is not necessarily your past experience. It's like the soft skills become so critical, because this is a role where you're going to develop the hard skills. You're going to do on-job learning for instructional design, for facilitation, for program management, project management. All of those things you're going to be doing in this job and learn on the job. And that's expected at this role. I don't expect someone to come to me with like Six Sigma certified. But what I do expect them to be is adept at communication, at EQ, at moving people, really understanding how to almost take a consultative approach to problems. So that ability to decipher what the real goal is important. And that skill can come from so many places. The other piece here is high accountability and ownership. So like finishing your projects on time, committing to timelines that make sense, understanding what you can and can't do in a certain amount of time. That level of prioritization and ownership, I'd also say, is important, and really high execution that is consistent in quality. You're going to be putting out so much stuff on a regular basis in sprints that the ability to kind of own, execute, do, and put things out on time is mission critical for this job.
Yes. I'd say one other skill that I personally look for, especially, and I pride myself in it, but is being adaptable. I know one of those things that when I was a specialist, like, just because I had a focus area, I had to be able to adapt to any other projects that were the needs of the business or of the org. And so that was one of the things that I highly look for in everything. I'll give them a prompt and then throw a curveball at them. Try to see how they adapt to that and see how you could handle that using the resources that you have already at your reach, and really hone in on, is this person going to make an impact, even though something was completely different than what they've already planned for? So
100%.
huge
That
point.
adaptability is, I mean, I think that these are good things for everyone.
Right.
But,
Yes.
but I'll say this, these are the things that like you'll become very frazzled very quickly, especially early in your career where you're not sure where you want to go, if that's not a thing that
Yeah.
you are comfortable with. A little bit of ambiguity because your career path is going to be a little ambiguous.
Yes.
And also I would say you have to have a learner mentality. Everything thrown at you that you've never done before, which is going to happen, has to feel exciting. So that natural curiosity to figure things out, that natural, or I'm not gonna say natural because I also think these are things that you work on and build,
Right.
but like inherently being curious about how to solve problems and taking ownership of them and wanting to is so important, because this is a place where you're coming to skill hunt. You're coming to pack on a bunch of things to decide where you want to go in your future. So being mentally open for that, right? And being a problem solver, not a problem finder. So
Yes.
I say that like this is a role where the things that you're working on are high impact, but they might be also high lift. So for example, reorganizing the CMS would be a huge undertaking. Updating newsletters regularly, maybe something that like the enablement team, like, yes, we know it matters, but it's not the highest priority because we have like other things. And so it's not getting done and they're like low visibility. What can't happen is you not taking ownership of that and coming and asking for permission and surveying 5 people. Like you have to be able to go, done is good. I'm going to put it out and come back with learnings and failures and be prepared for that. This is a job where it's low touch in the sense of like your leaders aren't going to be there guiding you through this whole program. They're working on their own projects as well.
Yeah, no, spot on. You took the words out of my mouth. I was going to say we have to be an adaptable and learner. You have to be open for that curiosity. I mean, truth be told, if I wasn't as curious as I was, I don't think I'd be doing half the stuff I'm doing now. So
it's true.
Get out there and learn. Do not stop. I'd even say in my current role, I'm still learning ungodly amounts of information, which is great.
Yeah.
So don't stop.
I also say like one last thing here is just being a learner can sometimes be confused for someone who's going to go research to find the right answer. And I want to really put the caveat here that there isn't a book you're going to read that's going to tell you how to do the specialist job, because it's different at every company. And honestly, it's one of the more reactive positions. It probably changes week to week. And so you don't have these like big initiatives that you're owning, right? You have little things that are being taken up and then a few big things. So it's also important here that like they're open to like the on the job learning and are prepared and want to do that. They want to join someplace where they're going to learn this skill on this job, not that someone is going to mentor you in it necessarily, or that you're going to go do a course on it. Right. Mentorship is pretty key in these roles, and oftentimes they get it. But if you're, for example, an enablement specialist reporting into a trainer, those are different, right? And your trainer might not actually have the skill set, which is why they have an enablement specialist. And so you're going to figure out a couple things on your own.
It's always great. I mean, take the initiative. This definitely has to also be a self-starter. I mean, this is one of those positions.
Oh, yeah, that was my long-winded way of saying that.
Yeah. Sum it up. You don't have to listen to the rest of that. Just fast forward.
Yeah, just like
self-starter.
Move forward and say self-starter.
All right. What do you want to go to first? Do we want to talk about how we're going to interview for this specialist, or how I'm going to position to hire one? Where do you want to go?
Okay, why don't we go to interview? Because I feel like people who are following along in the edge of their seats by now are probably people who like want to get into this job, and we've talked a lot about that.
Let's do it.
Yeah, so I would say interview here, like we just talked about a bunch of soft skills that are often quite difficult to articulate in an interview. And so if you're preparing for an interview, think through what have you worked on where you've demonstrated these things. Think through telling those stories. So it's not that you need to be ready to respond to every question. Like, what are your impact stories in the work that you've done that show that you're, taking extreme ownership, that you are someone who's trustworthy in your execution, that you are curious and a self-starter. Find the things that you've already done and note those down so that you can tell that story. Because in this stage, I'm not looking that you've maybe been a specialist before. I'm looking for what past behaviors can tell me that like that's where you're at, or owning the places where you failed and that you want to learn and why you want to make that learning jump. I think a focus on like what you hope to learn and gain from the experience is also pretty critical.
I'm going to add on to that. We talked about having the skill set of being adaptable. A lot of people that are going into this specific role as a specialist, we might not have that enablement foot in the door yet. So we're applying for those specialist roles. And as you said, Ashton, but come up with that story. Yeah, most of us don't have that direct enablement correlation yet for those stories as we're interviewing. So be adaptable. Find the solutions that you've done in your current role, if it's sales or CS or whatever it may be. Find a way that you actually helped others out by enabling them to do better. And that's where you need to come in and have that different mindset, because also that's going to shine a lot brighter that I can say, okay, you were in a different position. You weren't in the position that you're going to be in to make the change and impact that you're already providing to others. So as a hiring manager, like, yeah, that's exactly what I'm going to be looking for, of those different entities, and a great story to back that up.
For sure. And then, I mean, with any enablement job, your community, right? Do a back channel reference on that company, understand what you're going into. Is it a backfill or is it a new position? Are you actually reporting into an enablement leader, or are you reporting into a marketing leader or a trainer? Understand kind of the scope and lay of the land. And are you supporting all teams? Is it a specific initiative? Is there a specific goal why they're growing their team right now? Or are you just free for all? That'll help you also understand like how many different hats you might need to wear versus how you'll be focused.
It's a good thing too, especially if you're a new person in this job. Also ask for the 90-day roadmap or impact that they're looking at making. That could definitely give you some leg up on what you should look out for, or you should probably try to find people with those relative experiences as well.
Yeah. And I would say lastly, just be curious about the business. Don't forget to interview the business, but also scope the problem while you're in that call or meeting. So many people do this miss where we have this great conversation and then they don't ask me about the team that we're going to be working with, or they don't ask me like curious questions to get me thinking about things that I could be doing with that team. And that's just a place that you can actually like just exhibit curiosity and ownership in the call.
I'll definitely say, remember this, they're not interviewing you, you're also interviewing them. So don't give them the whole upper hand. All right, let's transition over to the hiring manager. What tips, what qualities? I mean, we talked about qualities already and what we're looking for. What are some direct hone-ins or projects that we could look at for a manager trying to hire a specialist?
Oh, you know what? I think I need to noodle on that one. So I'll let you go first here because you were a specialist and you went through a hiring process and you've also hired them. I'm hiring my first one, probably not as not as under my belt. So I'll let you take this one first.
Yeah. So I definitely would say let's start out with the project first. I feel like that might be an easier one to start out with, because a lot of us just want to figure out how do we take what we want and to roll it into something to see if they're going to fit. I know as far as my project was, it was how do I organize a project and how do I communicate, execute, and roll it out to a team? Not necessarily what does the training look like, because most companies, if they already they're looking at a trainer already for that part of that, but what was the entire project caseload of that entire project that you helped roll out? And having that detailed orientation of this is how I'm going to organize my work, this is how it's going to be planned, executed, and then this is the follow-up. Having those steps of what you're looking for, I think, is crucial, especially in that specialist role, because you never know what type of project is going to be thrown their way. Or if you're directly looking for a focus area, tie something that goes in with that focus area, or take a previous example of a project that failed within those areas, and how would this new person bring that light into your team? It's an easy way to take those misses and turn them into opportunities for growth too. So think about that as a manager. My other opportunity of advice for a hiring manager, again, don't discredit them if they have only been a sales rep. Don't discredit them if they've only been a CS rep. Many people in this field are looking to transition out of those roles for a specific reason. It's because they feel like they're more impactful when it comes down to this role other than sales or CS. So be very, very open. Do not just say only a salesperson could have this role, but have them have some sort of revenue acknowledgement to where they can continue to grow.
I think that's such good advice. And that actually goes both ways, where I'll say, if you're coming from a role that, you might be concerned that there's like bias about whether or not you can transition, write a cover letter. I cannot stress this enough. The amount of people who send a resume to me and I can't, as a hiring manager, I might be struggling to like mirror the experience myself. A cover letter is what does that for me. Bridge the gap between where you're at and where you want to go for me and make yourself stand out. And then the inverse is true for managers, where I think we forget that these are roles we hire for potential, not for today.
Yeah.
Yes, you might have a project I want you to work on right now, but I don't want to narrow someone's job into this one project and hire just for this skill set, as opposed to like, how do I want my team to grow? What is the impact that I hope? Well, what more things do I want to plan to give this person that I can have them own, and hire for that track? That'll actually open up your bias as a manager in terms of what you're willing to come in with. Because if you're saying it must be someone who has sales experience, or it must be someone with CS experience, it's like, well, if your sales reps could enable each other, they'd have time for that. Or if they wanted to, right? Because some of our best allies is like the rep who is an individual contributor, but sees the greater good and spends their time educating their team. If that person then sees a role like this and is excited and shows up at your doorstep, like, that's a gift and it's great.
Yeah, that's spot on. That's totally true. I think the big thing when you're hiring for any of these enablement roles, be very open-minded. I mean, again, all of us come from different backgrounds. It's not like that there is a career path in college right now to be an enablement practitioner. So
yeah,
I hate to say it, but it's kind of like the made up fairy tale role. Like, we all just landed happily here and this is where we're at, and we learned along the way. So make sure you're open about those as well too.
For sure. And I'll say this, like, if you're hiring in today's workforce, people are also much more educated about the opportunity. It's actually really competitive to get candidates. It's not this old world where like people are begging you for a job at all. And so there's a couple of things that you need to provide. And enablement, especially for those of us who like grew up in the ambiguity, you're not used to having to provide these like concrete goals or next steps, or like exactly what the opportunity is going to look like. And you actually do have to do that now, where you have to be like, here's the impact that you're going to own quarter by quarter. Here's what I might expect for you. And also here's what you're going to learn from me. Like, I have to be pitching how someone is going to grow and develop their career and why they should spend their time with me to do so. And so just not forgetting that there's a sales mechanic here that goes both ways, as well as really having your job description be clear about what a day in the life is going to look like, especially for those who are like leaders that are used to orchestrating multiple projects. You can't describe the role so aspirationally that someone doesn't realize what they're actually going to do day to day. And I think the further up you get down the chain, you kind of almost assume that someone doesn't want to be back there. And that role is actually still really exciting. And so describing the truth about like what the reality of the day to day and outcomes are going to look like and who their collaborators are going to be is important, so that someone is coming to you educated on the opportunity.
Yeah, 100%. I would definitely say that other duties as assigned, leave that out. Like, have your details and assigned.
Or like, if you write a list of nice to haves, say why.
Yeah.
Like, just say why. Like, if you're gonna list 14 tools that I need to work with, like, is it nice to have that I have that experience because I'm gonna own all those tools, or is it just nice to have? Like, think about. I say this: your job descriptions, only jobs to get people to apply to it, right?
Yep.
And have the right candidates show up. And so think about what you're putting on that paper. It's not your wish list. It's what's exciting for someone to see this opportunity, understand it, and go, that's something I want to solve. Yeah. And I just think we write job descriptions in a way where we don't always remember to do that. But to be fair, your people teams have probably been shouting this rooftop on some other podcast for a million years, and I'm pretending I vetted it. I did not. HR business partners are awesome at that. Your talent teams will be awesome at that. But I think in enablement, we take it for granted as if we're niche, and that like we can't articulate the impact and the things people need to do because we're in chaos and we struggle to do it for ourselves.
100%. Awesome. Ashton, again, week 4, we're here. We talked about our specialist. Thank you. This is amazing. I still can't thank you enough for all of this. Like, this is awesome for us to roll through this.
I'm loving this. And I'm super excited to talk about trainer, because I was a trainer for 2 years. My mom is still a trainer. And I have just like so many feels on training versus enablement and how they are in fact different career paths. So I'm pumped for next one.
Yeah. Ashton gave you the preview. Next week, we're talking about the trainer and that senior trainer role. Stay tuned. That will be week 5. We'll catch you guys all next Monday. Thanks, everyone.
Have a good one.